Welcome to Lore Worst Game, where we see if legendary figures really match their video game counterparts. Today, we'll be looking at Orpheus from Persona 3 Reload, and the myth that ends with nothing but his severe head. Orpheus was a legendary musician from Thrace, often said to be the son of Calliope, the muse of epic poetry. From the moment he learned to play the lyres, his music has a power no one else possessed. Stones and trees leaned toward him, wild animals grew tamed, and even rivers were said to pause in their flow. One of Orpheus' epic story comes from the voyage of Jason and the Argonauts, the legendary expedition to retrieve the Golden Fleet. It was the quest that brought together many of the greatest heroes of the age. At first, Orpheus seemed just like another figure on the ship, his role uncertain compared to the warriors around him. But soon, his gift would prove essential. Their greatest trial came when the ship approached the sirens. These creatures sang with voices so alluring that sailors would lose their will to steer, crashing their ships on the rock. As the ship approached the siren shore, the crew began to falter. The oar slowed, some men turned their heads, and even hardened heroes felt their strength slipping away. As hope began to fade, Orpheus lifted his lyres and played louder than the sirens themselves. His song was not only beautiful, it was commanding. It filled the crew with rhythm, restored their resolve, and drowned out the deadly voices. The Argonauts rowed in unison, steady and strong, until the ship sailed safely past. And in that moment, Orpheus proved that his music was not just a gift, but a power equal to the strength of any warriors on board. In time, Orpheus marries Eurydice, the woman he loved most. But their happiness was short-lived. Soon after the wedding, she wanders into a meadow and stepped on a snake. The bite was fatal, and she died almost instantly. Struck with grief, Orpheus resolved to do what no mortal has done: descend alive into the realm of the dead. Carrying only his lyres, he entered the Underworld, and his song reaches every corner. The spirits of vengeance pauses their torments. The soul of the dead gathers in silence, and even Hades and Persephone, the king and queen of the Underworld, were moved. Standing before them, he pledged for Eurydice's return. The ruler agreed, but with one ominous warning: she would follow him back. Yet he must walk ahead without ever turning to look. Only if he reaches the upper world without glancing behind would she be restored with him. Orpheus accepted and began the long ascent. But the path was silent, and he could not hear her footstep. Doubt started to grow, and just as the first light of the world appeared, he turned to look. And in that instant, Eurydice was pulled back into the darkness, reaching for him before she vanished forever. He tried to descend again, but the guardians of the Underworld refused to let him pass. No mortal was allowed to make the journey twice, and their duties was to ensure that the boundary between the living and the dead could not be crossed again. Overcome with grief, he withdrew from society. Some say he turned his affection toward young men. Others say that he simply wanders alone with his music. But Orpheus' story did not end there. Instead, it was about to get much worse. One day, Orpheus was visited by the Maenads, the frenzious followers of Dionysus, the god of wine. They demanded that he join them in their wild, wine-soaked rituals of eccentric worship. But Orpheus refused. Still consumed by grief and devoted to the memories of Eurydice, he rejected their invitation. This rejection enraged the Maenads, and in their fury, they tore him apart. His only remains, his head and his lyre, still sounding faint notes, floated down the river of Hebrews until they reached the islands of Lesbos, where his voice was said to linger in the wind. Later tellings add that the muses gathered his remains, or that his lyre was sent among the stars as the constellation, a reminder that his music touches both earth and the realm of the dead. In Persona 3 Reload, Orpheus is the very first persona available to the protagonist. At first glance, he already carries a lot of symbolic weight. His design is striking, a white and desaturated teal figure wrapped in a vivid red scarf, carrying a large lyres. Apart from the scarf, his face mirrored that of the protagonist, suggesting an intimate connection between the two. The in-game compendium gives him a brief description: a poet of Greek mythology skilled with the lyres. He tried to retrieve his wife from Hades, but she vanished when he looked upon her before reaching the surface. It's short, but it's immediately established him as more than just a starting persona. He's the one who set the tone for the journey ahead, tying the player role in Thanatos to one of the mythology's most famous descents into the Underworld. When it's come to the story connection, two stand out immediately. The first appear during the game opening act, at the very first full moon. As the protagonist summons Orpheus for the first time, he is almost immediately torn apart by Thanatos. This moment is a deliberate nod back to the myth, where Orpheus himself was ripped apart by the Maenads. The second connection comes through Thanatos itself. While Thanatos isn't exactly the same as Hades or the Underworld, the ideas overlap. In Greek tradition, Thanatos is described as a pit even deeper than the realm of the dead, reserved for the most wicked soul, condemned to eternal punishment. Some version of the myth even say that when Orpheus plays his lyres in the Underworld, his music reaches so far that it echoes all the way down into Thanatos. For a brief moment, even those tortured souls feel peace. That idea, together with the story of the Argonauts, becomes a powerful mirror for Persona 3. In that tale, the ship was on course to crash into a rock, drawn by the siren deadly song, a path toward a certain death. Yet Orpheus' music cut through their voices, steering the crew away from the destruction and giving them another chance at life. The ending of Persona 3 followed that same rhythm. Humanity itself yearned for Nyx and unconsciously called for death. But Orpheus once again changed the course. Through the protagonist, his song diverts humanity away from annihilation. And even if the miracle may only be temporary, sometimes even a short-lived miracle is enough. Enough for people to live, to change, and to decide for themselves what comes next. Let's talk a little bit more about his design. As mentioned earlier, the scene where Thanatos ripped Orpheus apart is a direct tribute to his mythic end. If you look closely at his body, almost all of his limbs are replaced with metallic parts, leaving only the head intact. This clearly nods back to the myth where Orpheus' head was the only part that survived after the Maenads tore him apart. And even though Orpheus still has a mouth, it's unclear if he could actually produce sounds since he has no lungs. So the music slightly comes from the speaker-like shapes built into his chest. It's a striking detail, as if his body itself has been rebuilt just to keep the music alive. One last small note, Orpheus' lyres also appear as a detail in the Velvet Room, strapped to the back of the protagonist's chair. It's not a direct myth reference, but it's reinforced how central the instrument is to his identity. In the game, Orpheus represents the full arcana, a card that symbolizes beginnings and limitless potential. It's the very first card of the major arcana, and it carries a mix of optimism and risk. On one hand, it speaks to enthusiasm and the courage to step forward. On the other, it reflects inexperience and naiveties, the same quality that led to Orpheus losing Eurydice when he looked back too soon. Looking at the stats and the abilities, a few things stands out. He's weak to darkness and electricity. The darkness weakness is easy to read as a reflection of his trauma and fear from his journey to the Underworld. His unique theurgy is called cadenza. In music, cadenza is an improvised or written solo passage, usually near the end of the concerto or aria. It's the moment where the performer shows off their skill, often free in rhythm, highly personal, and meant to be brilliant climax before the close of a piece. In the game, cadenza is performed by Orpheus together with Apsaras, a divine dancer from South and Southeast Asian tradition. In Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain myth, Apsaras are celestial performers who embody grace and music. The skill itself restores 50% HP and raise accuracy and evasion for all allies. It's a perfect match to his myth, a song that doesn't deal damage but instead heal, uplift, and bring others back to a group that might otherwise fall apart. Now that you have heard the lore and the connections, it's time for the verdicts. We saw Thanatos rip Orpheus apart, which line up with his mythic death. His metal limbs leave only the head intact, another clear nod to the story. Even his weakness to darkness remind us of the failed descents, and his signature move, Cadenza, highlight the music that define him. But perhaps the strongest connection comes in how the game mirror his role in the Argonaut voyage. Just as Orpheus turned the ship away from the certain death by drowning out the siren call, in Persona 3 his presence diverts humanity from its own yearning for death. It doesn't erase mortality and it doesn't last forever, but it's enough to give people another chance, enough to hold back Nyx so that humanity can decide what to do with the life it's been given. And where things get even more interesting is how Persona 3 changes the ending. In the myth, Orpheus could calm even the souls in Tartarus, but he could never calm his own grief. His song carries sorrow that never left him, even beyond death. In Persona 3, the protagonist shares that burden, but his story closes differently. He prevents the world ends, and while the cost is his own life, it is not torments. It's a peaceful passing, an ending that feels both connected to the myth and illuminate the message of Persona 3. That death is inevitable, so let's live a life without regrets. And it is that balance of myth honorings and reinvention that bring us to our final verdicts. Mythical accurate. Mythical accurate is the highest score we give, and it's a great way to start off the very first episode of Lore Worst Game. And if you love learning about the myth and the story that inspired the game you play, don't forget to subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and see you next time where the lore and game meets.